Welcome to One Book, One Coffee, where we dive deep into literature that shapes the way we think and feel about the world. I'm thrilled that you've chosen to spend your time with us as we explore The Interpretation of Dreams by Sigmund Freud. By being here, you've set yourself apart. Instead of getting lost in the endless scroll of social media or indulging in a binge-watching spree, you've chosen to invest in learning and introspection. This choice speaks volumes about your curiosity and drive to understand the depths of the human psyche. The Interpretation of Dreams is a groundbreaking work that revolutionized our understanding of dreams and the unconscious mind. It matters because it opened up new pathways in psychology and gave us tools to decipher the hidden meanings behind our nightly visions. This book has been praised by intellectuals and thinkers across the world for its profound insights. Notably, Carl Jung, one of Freud's contemporaries and a significant figure in psychology, engaged deeply with Freud's work, though his views later diverged. Sigmund Freud, the author, was a pioneering neurologist whose early life experiences and relentless curiosity about the human mind led him to develop the field of psychoanalysis. Born in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Freud's personal struggles and relentless pursuit of knowledge shaped his revolutionary ideas. Now, a quick note before we dive in. This is a detailed chapter-by-chapter walkthrough, so it's going to be a longer session. Take your time with it. There's no rush. If you need to step away, save this video to your watch later or forward the link to yourself on WhatsApp so you can pick up right where you left off. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's walk through this book together, chapter by chapter, idea by idea. Let's begin. Decode the Language of Dreams. Sigmund Freud was a pioneering neurologist whose early life experiences and relentless curiosity about the human mind led him to develop the field of psychoanalysis. Born in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Freud's personal struggles and relentless pursuit of knowledge shaped his revolutionary ideas. Picture this. You're sitting in a dusty library in 1899, surrounded by towering shelves of books about dreams. You pull down volume after volume, each one claiming to unlock the mysteries of our sleeping minds. Some tell you dreams are messages from the gods. Others insist they're just random brain static. A few suggest they predict the future. Welcome to the chaotic, fascinating world of dream science before Freud changed everything forever. When Freud sat down to write The Interpretation of Dreams, he wasn't working in a vacuum. He was stepping into a centuries-old conversation that had been going in circles for millennia. Think about it this way. Imagine you're trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle, but every expert before you has been working with pieces from completely different boxes. That's exactly what the scientific literature on dreams looked like at the turn of the 20th century. The ancient world had some wild theories about dreams. The Egyptians built dream temples where people would sleep, hoping to receive divine visions that would cure their ailments or reveal their destinies. The Greeks weren't much different. They believed dreams were visits from gods, particularly Morpheus, who would shape-shift through your sleeping mind, delivering important messages. Now, think about this for a moment. Doesn't this sound remarkably similar to how we still talk about dreams today? We say we had a visit from a deceased loved one in a dream, or that a dream came to us with an important insight. But as civilization marched toward the scientific age, scholars began looking for more rational explanations. The medieval period brought us fascinating theories about dreams being caused by bodily humors, those mysterious fluids that supposedly controlled our health and temperament. Too much black bile, nightmares, an excess of blood, vivid, passionate dreams. It sounds absurd now, but consider this. We still talk about having feverish dreams when we're sick, or notice how our dreams change based on what we eat before bed. The ancients weren't entirely wrong about the body influencing our dream life. By Freud's time, the scientific community had split into several camps, each more confident than the last that they'd cracked the code. The physiological school dominated the conversation, led by researchers who believed dreams were nothing more than the brain's attempt to make sense of random neural firing during sleep. Picture your brain as a radio picking up static between stations, and dreams as your mind's desperate attempt to turn that static into a recognizable song. These scientists pointed to how external stimuli could influence dreams. Ring a bell near a sleeping person, and they might dream of church bells or school dismissals. Spray a bit of perfume in the room, and suddenly they're dreaming of flower gardens or their grandmother's house. This approach felt satisfyingly scientific and rational. After all, if you could trace a dream directly back to a physical cause, what mystery remained? One researcher famously documented how sleeping with his arm positioned uncomfortably led to dreams of being tortured. Another noted how the sound of dripping water transformed into elaborate dreams about waterfalls and rainstorms. It was neat, tidy, and completely mechanical. Dreams were just biological hiccups, nothing more meaningful than a sneeze or a yawn. But here's where things get interesting. Even as these physiological explanations gained popularity, they couldn't account for the sheer weirdness of dreams. Why would random neural static consistently produce such bizarre, emotionally charged narratives? Why do we dream about flying, about being chased by faceless figures, about showing up naked to important meetings? If dreams were just biological noise, why did they feel so meaningful to the dreamers themselves? Enter the psychological school, a smaller but passionate group of researchers who insisted that dreams revealed something important about the mind. These scholars noticed patterns that the physiologists couldn't explain away. They observed how dreams often featured unresolved conflicts from waking life, how emotional traumas seemed to replay themselves in symbolic form during sleep. One researcher documented how students consistently dreamed about failing exams during stressful academic periods, even when no external stimuli were present to trigger such dreams. The psychological camp also grappled with the strange logic of dreams. In dreams, we accept the impossible as perfectly normal. We have conversations with dead relatives, travel through time, transform into animals, and wake up thinking, well, that made perfect sense at the time. These researchers argued that dreams operated according to different rules than waking consciousness, rules that might reveal hidden aspects of mental functioning. Now, imagine being Freud, reading through all this conflicting research. On one side, you have scientists reducing dreams to mere biology, stripping them of any psychological significance. On the other, you have researchers insisting dreams are meaningful but struggling to develop a coherent theory about what that meaning might be. Most frustratingly, both camps seem to be talking past each other, unable to bridge the gap between the physical and psychological aspects of dreaming. What struck Freud most powerfully was how the existing literature consistently underestimated the complexity of dreams. Researchers would focus on single elements, isolated fragments, rather than examining dreams as complete psychological productions. It was like trying to understand a symphony by analyzing individual notes instead of listening to the entire composition. The scientific community had developed sophisticated methods for studying the mechanics of dreaming, but had largely ignored the question that fascinated ordinary dreamers. What do my dreams actually mean? This gap between scientific explanation and human experience created the perfect opening for Freud's revolutionary approach. He would take dreams seriously as psychological phenomena, while maintaining scientific rigor in his analysis. Rather than dismissing dreams as meaningless brain static or accepting them as mysterious divine messages, he would treat them as windows into the unconscious mind, complex psychological productions that followed their own internal logic. As we'll discover in the chapters ahead, Freud's genius lay not in rejecting the previous research entirely, but in synthesizing the best insights from both camps while adding his own groundbreaking perspective. He would show that dreams are indeed influenced by bodily states and external stimuli, but that they're also sophisticated psychological creations that reveal our deepest wishes, fears, and conflicts in disguised form. Picture this. You're sitting across from someone who's about to completely revolutionize how we understand the human mind, and he's explaining his breakthrough discovery over coffee. That someone is Sigmund Freud, and what he's sharing with you is nothing short of extraordinary. We've been talking about how dreams fascinated humanity for centuries, but now we're diving into something that changed everything: Freud's revolutionary method for actually interpreting what our dreams mean. Now think about this for a moment. Before Freud came along, dream interpretation was mostly guesswork, superstition, or ancient wisdom passed down through generations. People would consult dream books that said things like, "If you dream of water, you'll have good luck," or "Dreaming of death means transformation." But Freud looked at this whole approach and essentially said, "We're doing this all wrong." He realized that dreams aren't universal symbols with the same meaning for everyone. They're deeply personal messages from our own unconscious minds. Freud's method was radical because it was scientific, systematic, and individualized. He called it free association, and it's actually quite simple in concept, though profound in practice. Instead of looking up dream symbols in some ancient book, Freud would have his patients lie on his famous couch and simply talk about whatever came to mind when they thought about each element of their dream. No censoring, no logical thinking, just letting their minds wander freely from one thought to the next. Let me give you a vivid example of how this worked. Imagine a patient comes to Freud and says, "I dreamed I was in a house with many rooms and I kept opening doors, but behind each door was just another corridor." Now the old-school dream interpreter might flip through a book and say, "Ah yes, houses represent the self, doors represent opportunities." But Freud would say, "Tell me about houses. What comes to mind?" And the patient might start talking about their childhood home, then mention how their mother always kept certain rooms locked, then remember feeling excluded from adult conversations, and suddenly they're uncovering deep feelings about being shut out of important family secrets. This is where Freud's genius really shines through. He understood that our minds work through association. One thought leads to another, and if we follow that chain long enough, we'll eventually arrive at the real emotional core of what the dream is trying to tell us. It's like following breadcrumbs through a forest, except the breadcrumbs are thoughts and feelings, and the destination is self-understanding. But here's what makes Freud's method so relevant to our modern world. We're still using versions of it today, often without even realizing it. Think about therapy, journaling, or even those late-night conversations with friends where you start talking about one thing and end up discovering something completely unexpected about yourself. That's free association in action. When you're writing in your journal and you start with "I'm stressed about work," and somehow end up writing about your relationship with your father, you're following the same principle Freud discovered. Freud also introduced the revolutionary idea that dreams have both manifest content and latent content. The manifest content is what you actually remember, the story, the images, the events that happened in the dream. But the latent content is the hidden meaning, the real message your unconscious is trying to send you. It's like the difference between reading a text message and understanding what someone really means when they say "fine" with a period at the end. We all know that period carries a lot more weight than just punctuation. Now, think about this in terms of modern communication. We live in an age of subtlety, subtext, and hidden meanings. Social media posts, text messages, even professional emails are layered with meaning beyond their surface content. Freud's insight that our dreams work the same way, that there's always more beneath the surface, feels incredibly contemporary. Your unconscious mind is basically sending you encrypted messages every night, and Freud gave us the decoder ring. One of the most fascinating aspects of Freud's method is how he handled resistance. He noticed that patients would often hit walls in their free association. They'd suddenly stop talking, claim they couldn't think of anything, or insist that a particular dream element was meaningless. But Freud realized that this resistance itself was meaningful. It was like a neon sign pointing to exactly where the important stuff was buried. When someone says, "Oh, that part of the dream doesn't mean anything." That's often precisely the part that means everything. This insight translates beautifully to our daily lives. How often do we dismiss our own thoughts or feelings as nothing important, when they're actually trying to tell us something crucial? That nagging feeling you can't quite explain, that person who irritates you for reasons you can't articulate, that career path you keep dismissing as unrealistic. These might be exactly the areas where your unconscious is trying to get your attention. Freud's method also emphasized the importance of the dreamer's own associations rather than imposing external interpretations. This was revolutionary because it put the power of understanding back in the hands of the individual. Your dreams are uniquely yours, shaped by your experiences, your relationships, your fears and desires. What a snake means in your dream might be completely different from what it means in mine, and that's not just okay, it's the whole point. As we move forward in our exploration of Freud's dream theory, we'll see how this method of interpretation opens up entire worlds of self-discovery. But for now, consider this. Every night, as you drift off to sleep, your mind begins crafting intricate stories filled with symbols, emotions, and hidden meanings. Thanks to Freud's revolutionary approach, these aren't just random neural firings. They're personal messages waiting to be decoded, insights into your deepest self that are more accessible than you might think. The key isn't finding the right interpretation, but rather following your own mental breadcrumbs to discover what your unconscious mind is trying to tell you. Picture this. You're sitting across from me with your favorite cup of coffee, and I'm about to share one of the most revolutionary ideas that ever emerged from the human mind. We've been exploring Freud's groundbreaking work on dreams, and now we're diving into what might be his most famous insight of all, the idea that our dreams are actually wish fulfillments, secret messages from our unconscious mind revealing our deepest desires. Now, before you roll your eyes and think this sounds like something out of a fortune cookie, let me tell you why this concept completely transformed how we understand the human psyche. Freud wasn't just throwing around mystical ideas here. He was proposing something that, once you really think about it, makes profound sense about why we dream at all. Think about the last vivid dream you remember. Maybe you were flying through the sky, or perhaps you found yourself back in high school taking a test you hadn't studied for, or maybe you were having an intense conversation with someone you haven't spoken to in years. What if I told you that buried within that seemingly random collection of images and emotions was actually your mind's way of fulfilling a wish you might not even consciously recognize you have? Freud's central argument is beautifully simple yet deeply complex. He suggests that dreams serve as a kind of psychological safety valve, allowing our unconscious mind to express desires that our waking, rational mind might find unacceptable or impossible to fulfill. It's like having a secret theater in your head, where all the plays your conscious mind would never approve get performed every single night. Let me share one of Freud's own examples that illustrates this beautifully. He tells the story of a patient who dreamed of eating a delicious smoked salmon sandwich. Now, on the surface, this seems like nothing more than a food fantasy, right? But when Freud dug deeper, he discovered something fascinating. This woman was on a strict diet and had been denying herself rich foods. Her unconscious mind, unable to bear this deprivation, created a dream where she could indulge freely without any real-world consequences. The dream fulfilled her wish to eat what she couldn't allow herself to have while awake. But here's where it gets really interesting. Freud argued that not all wishes in dreams are this straightforward. Many of our deepest wishes are so unacceptable to our conscious mind that they have to be disguised, transformed into symbols and metaphors that our sleeping brain can safely explore. It's like your unconscious mind is speaking in code, using a symbolic language to express things your waking self might find shocking or inappropriate. Consider how this plays out in our modern world. You know that recurring dream where you're unprepared for an important presentation at work. On one level, it might seem like anxiety, but Freud would suggest looking deeper. Perhaps it's fulfilling a hidden wish to be free from the pressures of professional responsibility, or maybe it's expressing a desire to return to a simpler time when your biggest worry was a school exam rather than mortgage payments and career advancement. Now think about this. How often do you wake up from a dream feeling like you've experienced something you could never have in real life? Maybe you've dreamed of confronting someone who hurt you years ago, saying exactly what you wished you had said at the time. Or perhaps you've found yourself in a dream where you're incredibly talented at something you've always wanted to master, but never had the courage or opportunity to pursue. These aren't just random neural firings. They're your mind's way of giving you experiences that fulfill psychological needs your waking life cannot satisfy. What makes this concept so powerful is how it reveals the incredible creativity of our unconscious mind. Think of dreams as your personal Hollywood studio, complete with elaborate sets, complex storylines, and a cast of characters drawn from your entire life experience. Every night, your unconscious director is creating these intricate productions designed to give you exactly what some part of you desperately wants, even if you don't consciously realize you want it. Freud also noticed something remarkable about children's dreams versus adult dreams. Children's dreams tend to be much more direct in their wish fulfillment. A child who was denied candy might simply dream of eating all the sweets they want. But as we grow older and internalize social rules and expectations, our dream wishes become more elaborate and disguised. It's as if our unconscious mind learns to speak in increasingly sophisticated metaphors, to sneak past the psychological sensors we've developed. This connects to something we all experience in our daily lives, that gap between what we think we should want and what we actually desire deep down. Your dreams become a space where these hidden desires can safely emerge and be satisfied, at least symbolically. That dream where you quit your job dramatically and walk out feeling liberated. It might be fulfilling a wish for freedom that you can't consciously acknowledge because it conflicts with your responsibilities and practical needs. The beauty of understanding dreams as wish fulfillments is that it gives us a window into parts of ourselves we might never otherwise access. It's like having a conversation with the most honest version of yourself, the one that doesn't worry about social expectations or practical limitations. Your dreams reveal what you truly long for, even when those longings seem impossible or inappropriate in your waking life. As we wrap up this exploration of dreams as wish fulfillments, consider how this insight might change the way you think about your own dream life. Instead of dismissing that strange dream you had last night as meaningless mental noise, what if you approached it as a message from the deepest part of yourself, revealing wishes and desires that deserve your attention and understanding? What if your dreams are actually your unconscious mind's way of showing you what you really need to feel whole and satisfied? This revolutionary idea that Freud introduced over a century ago continues to influence how we understand human psychology today, reminding us that beneath our rational, controlled exterior lies a rich inner world of desires and wishes that shape us in ways we're only beginning to understand. Picture this. You're sitting across from me with your favorite cup of coffee, and I'm about to tell you something that might completely change how you think about your dreams. We've been talking about Freud's revolutionary ideas, and now we're diving into one of his most fascinating discoveries. The idea that our dreams are master magicians, constantly performing elaborate tricks to hide their true meaning from us. Now, think about this for a moment. Have you ever woken up from a dream that felt incredibly important, yet made absolutely no logical sense? Maybe you dreamed about flying through your childhood home while wearing your work clothes, or perhaps you found yourself having an intense conversation with a talking elephant who somehow reminded you of your boss. Freud would tell you that these bizarre, seemingly random elements aren't random at all. They're carefully crafted disguises, protecting you from truths your conscious mind isn't quite ready to handle. Freud called this process dream distortion, and he believed it was one of the most ingenious defense mechanisms our minds possess. Think of your unconscious as a rebellious teenager trying to sneak forbidden thoughts past the strict parent that is your conscious mind. The unconscious can't just march these thoughts through the front door. Oh no, that would be far too threatening. Instead, it has to get creative, dressing up these thoughts in costumes so elaborate that even you don't recognize them. Let me share one of Freud's most compelling examples. He tells us about a woman who dreamed of a large, imposing building with many rooms and corridors. In the dream, she felt both fascinated and terrified as she explored this structure. Now, you might think this is just a simple architectural fantasy, but Freud saw something much deeper. Through careful analysis, he discovered that this building represented the woman's own body, and her exploration of it reflected her complex feelings about her sexuality and femininity. The building wasn't just a building, it was a symbol, a safe way for her unconscious to explore feelings that her waking mind found too uncomfortable to address directly. This is where Freud's genius really shines. He understood that our minds are constantly translating emotional truths into symbolic language. It's like having a built-in poet working the night shift, taking our raw, unprocessed feelings and transforming them into elaborate metaphorical productions. Your anxiety about a presentation at work might manifest as a dream about being chased by a faceless figure through endless hallways. Your unresolved grief might appear as a dream about searching for something precious that you've lost in a vast, empty house. But here's what makes this even more interesting. And this is something that feels incredibly relevant in our modern world of social media and carefully curated online personas. Just as we filter our Instagram photos and choose our words carefully in emails, our unconscious minds are constantly filtering and editing our dream content. The difference is that, while our conscious filtering is about presenting ourselves well to others, our unconscious filtering is about protecting ourselves from ourselves. Consider how this plays out in our contemporary lives. We live in an age where we're constantly bombarded with information, where we're expected to have opinions about everything, where we're always on. Our unconscious minds are working overtime, processing not just our personal experiences, but also the endless stream of global events, social pressures, and digital interactions that fill our days. Is it any wonder that our dreams have become even more complex, even more symbolic? Think about the last time you had a stress dream about being late for something important, but in the dream, you kept getting distracted by the most bizarre obstacles. Maybe your car turned into a shopping cart, or you had to stop and explain quantum physics to a group of confused penguins. These aren't just random neural firings. They're your mind's way of processing the very real anxiety you feel about meeting expectations and navigating the complexities of modern life, but in a form that's safe enough for you to experience while sleeping. Freud identified several key mechanisms that our minds use to create these disguises. There's condensation, where multiple ideas or people get compressed into a single dream image, like dreaming about a person who somehow looks like your mother, but acts like your best friend and has the voice of your third-grade teacher. Then there's displacement, where the emotional intensity gets shifted from its original source to something seemingly unrelated. You might dream about being furious at a stranger for stepping on your flowers when you're actually angry about feeling unappreciated at work. Perhaps most fascinating is what Freud called symbolic representation, the way our minds transform abstract concepts into concrete images. Love becomes a warm, glowing light. Fear becomes a dark, pursuing shadow. Ambition becomes climbing an endless mountain. Our unconscious minds are constantly creating this rich symbolic vocabulary, and once you start paying attention to it, you begin to see patterns that can offer profound insights into your inner life. Now you might be wondering, why does our mind go to all this trouble? Why not just give us straightforward dreams about what's really bothering us? Freud believed that this disguise mechanism serves a crucial protective function. Our unconscious thoughts often contain material that would be too shocking, too painful, or too threatening for our conscious minds to handle directly. By wrapping these thoughts in symbolic clothing, our minds allow us to process difficult emotions and experiences without overwhelming our psychological defenses. This understanding of dream distortion offers us something incredibly valuable, a way to become detectives of our own inner lives. When we start to see our dreams not as meaningless brain static, but as carefully crafted messages from our unconscious, we gain access to a deeper level of self-understanding. We begin to recognize the patterns in our symbolic language, the recurring themes that point to unresolved conflicts or unexpressed desires. As we continue our journey through Freud's revolutionary insights, remember that understanding dream distortion isn't about becoming your own therapist overnight. It's about developing a more nuanced, more compassionate relationship with the complex, creative, endlessly fascinating mind that creates your nightly adventures. Your dreams are trying to tell you something. They're just speaking in a language that requires a little patience and curiosity to decode. So here we are, settling into one of the most fascinating chapters of Freud's masterwork, and honestly, this is where things get really interesting. We've been exploring the mysterious landscape of dreams, and now Freud is about to pull back the curtain on something we've all wondered about. You know that moment when you wake up from a dream and think, where on earth did that come from? Well, Freud is here to tell us that nothing in our dreams is quite as random as it seems. Picture this. You're having coffee with a detective who specializes in solving the most peculiar mysteries, except instead of investigating crimes, he's investigating the strange theater of your sleeping mind. That's essentially what Freud is doing in this section on the material and sources of dreams. He's saying, look, every single element in your dream came from somewhere real, somewhere concrete in your waking life. It's like your mind is this incredible recycling center that takes fragments of your daily experience and weaves them into these surreal nighttime stories. Now think about this for a moment. Have you ever noticed how sometimes the most random person from your past shows up in a dream? Maybe it's your third-grade teacher, or that cashier from the grocery store you saw 3 weeks ago, or even someone you just glimpsed on the subway. Freud would tell you that none of these appearances are accidental. Your dreaming mind is like a meticulous archivist, filing away every face, every conversation, every fleeting impression, and then pulling from this vast library when it constructs your dreams. What's absolutely brilliant about Freud's approach here is how he traces these dream elements back to their sources. He talks about recent impressions, those vivid experiences from the day or two before the dream. These are like the fresh ingredients in your mental kitchen. But then there are what he calls the indifferent impressions, those seemingly meaningless moments that somehow find their way into our dreams. You know, like dreaming about a particular doorknob or a specific shade of blue you noticed on a building. These details seem so trivial when we're awake, but in dreams, they can become central characters in elaborate stories. It's fascinating how Freud demonstrates that our dreams are essentially collaborative productions between our recent experiences and our deeper memories. Imagine your mind as this sophisticated film studio, where recent footage gets spliced together with archived material from years past. That childhood home appears in your dream, but it's furnished with objects from your current apartment. Your deceased grandmother is there, but she's wearing the dress you saw on a mannequin yesterday. It's like your unconscious mind is this master editor, creating these impossible but emotionally resonant combinations. What really strikes me about this insight is how it applies to our modern digital lives. Think about how much visual information we consume daily through social media, streaming services, news feeds. Freud was working in an era where people's visual input was relatively limited compared to today. Now we're bombarded with thousands of images, faces, and scenarios every single day. Our dream mind has an absolutely enormous database to work with. That random TikTok video you scrolled past might provide the setting for tonight's dream, combined with a conversation you overheard at work and a memory from college. Freud also makes this crucial distinction between what he calls the dream thoughts and the dream content. The dream thoughts are the underlying psychological material, the real emotional and mental content that your psyche is trying to process. The dream content is how that material gets disguised and transformed into the strange narrative you actually experience. It's like the difference between the original script of a play and what you see when it's performed by actors in costumes on a stage with special effects. Here's where it gets really intriguing. Freud argues that dreams take these everyday materials and use them as a kind of camouflage for deeper psychological processes. Your mind needs to work through certain emotions or conflicts, but it can't do so directly while you sleep. So it borrows neutral, everyday images and transforms them into symbols that can carry this deeper meaning. That anxiety about a work presentation might show up as a dream about being chased through your childhood neighborhood. The neighborhood is the borrowed material, but the chase represents the real psychological content. This process is remarkably similar to how we use metaphors in everyday language. When we say someone is carrying a heavy burden, we're borrowing the concrete image of physical weight to express an abstract emotional reality. Dreams work the same way, except they're using the entire catalog of your lived experience as potential metaphorical material. What's particularly relevant for us today is how this understanding can help us make sense of our increasingly complex inner lives. We live in an age of information overload, where we're constantly processing new experiences, relationships, and challenges. Our dreams become these incredible processing centers where all this material gets sorted, combined, and transformed into symbolic narratives that help us work through our psychological needs. Freud's detective work in tracing dream sources also reveals something profound about memory itself. We tend to think of forgetting as a loss, but dreams show us that nothing is truly forgotten. Those seemingly insignificant moments, the faces we barely noticed, the conversations we thought we dismissed, they're all still there, archived in the unconscious, ready to be called upon when our dreaming mind needs them for its mysterious purposes. As we move forward in our exploration of Freud's dream theory, keep this fundamental insight in mind. Your dreams are not mysterious messages from some external source, but rather ingenious creations of your own mind, built entirely from the materials of your own experience. Every dream is, in a sense, an autobiography written in the symbolic language of the unconscious. And understanding this connection between our waking life and our dream life opens up fascinating possibilities for self-understanding and psychological insight that remain as relevant today as they were when Freud first mapped this territory of the human psyche. Picture this. You're sitting in a movie theater, but instead of watching the film that was actually shot, you're seeing a heavily edited, censored, and completely rearranged version. The original footage exists somewhere in the cutting room, but what reaches your eyes has been transformed by invisible editors working behind the scenes. This, my friend, is exactly what Freud discovered happens every single night in your mind when you dream. Welcome back to another session with The Interpretation of Dreams, where we're diving deep into one of Freud's most fascinating concepts, the dream work. Grab your coffee, because we're about to explore the hidden machinery of your sleeping mind, and I promise you'll never think about your dreams the same way again. Now here's where Freud gets really clever. He realized that dreams aren't just random nonsense or mystical messages from the gods. Instead, they're the end product of an incredibly sophisticated psychological process. Think about it this way. Your unconscious mind is like a rebellious teenager trying to sneak forbidden thoughts past a strict parent. The parent, in this case, is what Freud called the censor, a psychological bouncer that guards the gates of consciousness. The dream work is essentially the teenager's elaborate scheme to get those forbidden thoughts past the bouncer in disguise. But what exactly are these forbidden thoughts trying to sneak through? Freud argued they're usually wishes, often uncomfortable ones that our waking mind would rather not acknowledge. Maybe it's that secret resentment toward your seemingly perfect colleague, or that lingering attraction to someone you shouldn't be thinking about. These wishes don't just disappear when we go to sleep. Instead, They put on elaborate costumes and throw a masquerade party in our dreams. The dream work operates through several ingenious mechanisms, and understanding them is like getting a backstage pass to your own mind's theater production. The first major process is condensation, and it's absolutely mind-blowing when you think about it. Imagine you're trying to pack for a month-long trip, but you can only bring a carry-on bag. You'd have to get creative, right? You might wear your heaviest boots on the plane and stuff socks inside your shoes. That's condensation in dreams. Multiple thoughts, feelings, and memories get compressed into single dream images. That strange dream character who looks like your high school teacher but acts like your mother and lives in your childhood home. That's condensation at work, creating a super-efficient symbolic package that carries multiple meanings at once. Then there's displacement, which is perhaps even more cunning. Picture a political cartoonist who can't directly criticize a powerful leader, so instead draws a donkey or elephant to represent them. Displacement works similarly in dreams, shifting emotional intensity from its original target to something safer or more acceptable. You might dream about being furious at your pet goldfish when you're actually angry at your boss. The emotion is real, but it's been cleverly redirected to avoid triggering your internal alarm system. Now think about this. Have you ever woken up from a dream that felt incredibly meaningful and profound, but when you tried to tell someone about it, it sounded completely ridiculous? That's because of what Freud called secondary revision. This is the DreamWorks final editing pass, where your mind tries to create a somewhat coherent narrative from what is essentially a collection of symbolic fragments. It's like having a very creative but slightly drunk editor trying to make sense of a surreal art film. The result often feels meaningful to you, but bizarre to everyone else. But here's where it gets really interesting for us modern dreamers. Freud was writing in an era of strict social conventions, where people wore multiple layers of clothing and couldn't even mention certain body parts in polite company. Yet his insights about dream work remain startlingly relevant today. Sure, we might not be repressing quite the same things our Victorian ancestors were, but we're still walking around with thoughts and feelings we'd rather not examine too closely. Consider how this plays out in our digital age. We curate our social media presence, carefully selecting which version of ourselves to present to the world. But our dreams, they're like our unfiltered private Instagram stories that only our unconscious mind gets to see. The dream work is constantly processing our daily experiences, our scroll through the phone anxieties, our Zoom meeting frustrations, and our Netflix binge guilt, transforming them into the strange theater of sleep. I love how Freud described the dream work as neither logical nor illogical, but rather operating by its own unique rules. It's like learning that there's an entire language being spoken in your house every night while you sleep, a language that follows grammar rules completely different from waking thought. This language speaks in symbols, puns, visual metaphors, and emotional associations rather than linear logic. What makes this particularly fascinating is how the dream work reveals the incredible creativity of the unconscious mind. Every night, without any conscious effort, your brain is producing original content that would make the most innovative filmmakers jealous. It's creating impossible architectures, blending past and present, mixing people and places in ways that somehow feel emotionally true, even when they're logically absurd. The practical wisdom here is profound. Understanding dream work helps us recognize that our minds are far more complex and creative than we give them credit for. It suggests that those weird, seemingly meaningless dreams might actually be your psyche's way of processing experiences and emotions that your conscious mind isn't quite ready to handle directly. So the next time you wake up from a strange dream about flying through your childhood bedroom while being chased by a talking sandwich, remember, you've just witnessed the dream work in action. Your unconscious mind has been busy all night, transforming raw psychological material into symbolic stories, creating meaning through metaphor, and giving voice to parts of yourself that rarely get to speak during your waking hours. As we continue our journey through Freud's revolutionary insights, We'll explore how understanding these hidden processes can unlock new levels of self-awareness and psychological insight. The dream work isn't just ancient psychology. It's a timeless map to the hidden territories of human consciousness. Picture this. You're sitting across from me at your favorite coffee shop, steam rising from your mug, and I'm about to share something that will completely change how you think about what happens in your mind every single night. We've been exploring Freud's groundbreaking work on dreams, and now we're diving into perhaps the most fascinating part of his entire theory, the actual psychology behind how our minds create these nightly adventures. You know that moment when you wake up from a dream and think, where on earth did that come from? Well, Freud would tell you that your brain is actually working harder while you sleep than you might imagine. It's not just randomly throwing images together like some cosmic slot machine. Instead, there's an incredibly sophisticated psychological process happening, and understanding it is like getting a backstage pass to the theater of your own mind. Think about your brain as having different departments, like a bustling office building. During the day, the executive department, what Freud called the conscious mind, is running the show, making decisions, filtering information, keeping you socially appropriate. But when you fall asleep, it's like the night shift takes over, and suddenly the usually quiet departments get their chance to speak up. The unconscious mind, which has been politely waiting in the wings all day, finally gets to express itself. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Freud discovered that dreams aren't just random neural firing. They're actually the result of a psychological conflict. Imagine you have desires, wishes, and impulses that your waking mind finds unacceptable or inappropriate. Maybe you're frustrated with your boss, or you have feelings you can't express, or there are childhood memories that still sting. Your conscious mind, being the good citizen it is, pushes these thoughts down into the basement of your psyche. But here's the thing about basements. Just because you can't see what's down there doesn't mean it's gone. When you sleep, these repressed thoughts and wishes start knocking on the door, wanting to come upstairs and have their moment. But even in sleep, your mind has a security system. Freud called this the censor. Think of it as a psychological bouncer that still won't let these raw, unfiltered thoughts just waltz into your consciousness. So what happens? Your clever unconscious mind gets creative. It disguises these forbidden thoughts in symbols, metaphors, and bizarre storylines that can slip past the censor undetected. Let me give you a modern example that might resonate. Say you're dealing with a controlling parent who still treats you like a child, but you can't bring yourself to confront them directly because it feels too threatening or disrespectful. You might dream about being chased by a giant, or being trapped in your childhood bedroom, or perhaps finding yourself back in elementary school, unable to find your classroom. Your unconscious mind is expressing your feelings of powerlessness and frustration, but it's doing so in a way that doesn't trigger your internal alarm bells. Freud identified several key psychological mechanisms that our minds use during this dream construction process. The first is what he called condensation. Imagine taking several different people, emotions, or situations, and blending them into one dream character or scenario. It's like your mind is creating a psychological smoothie, mixing different ingredients to create something that represents multiple things at once. You might dream about a person who looks like your college roommate, but acts like your mother and has the voice of your first boss. Your unconscious is efficiently packaging multiple relationships and feelings into one convenient dream figure. Then there's displacement, which is perhaps even more clever. This is when your mind takes the emotional intensity from something truly important and transfers it to something seemingly trivial in the dream. You might have a dream where you're absolutely devastated about losing a pencil, when actually you're processing grief about a relationship ending. The real emotion is there, but it's been moved to a safer target, like emotional camouflage. But here's what really blew my mind when I first understood this. Freud realized that our dreaming minds think in a completely different language than our waking minds. While we're awake, we think logically, sequentially with cause and effect. But in dreams, our minds operate more like poetry than prose. Everything is symbolic, metaphorical, visual. Time doesn't matter. Past, present, and future can exist simultaneously. Logic gets thrown out the window, and instead we have what Freud called primary process thinking. Consider how this might show up in your own life. Have you ever had a dream where you were simultaneously in your current home and your childhood home, or where you were yourself but also somehow someone else? That's your unconscious mind showing you that it doesn't operate by the same rules as your logical, waking consciousness. It's working with associations, feelings, and symbolic connections rather than linear thinking. What's particularly fascinating is how this dream psychology reveals the incredible creativity of our unconscious minds. Think about it. Every single night, your brain is essentially writing, directing, and starring in its own surreal movie, complete with plot twists, emotional arcs, and symbolic meaning. And it's doing this automatically without any conscious effort from you. It's like having a brilliant, if somewhat eccentric, artist living in your head who only comes out to work when you're asleep. This understanding transforms how we might approach our own dreams and mental life. Instead of dismissing dreams as meaningless, we can begin to see them as communications from parts of ourselves that rarely get to speak during our busy waking hours. They're letters from our unconscious, written in a symbolic language that, once we begin to understand it, can offer profound insights into our emotional lives, our conflicts, and our deepest concerns. As we continue our journey through Freud's revolutionary ideas, keep this psychological framework in mind. Understanding that dreams are the product of sophisticated mental processes, not random chaos, opens up entirely new possibilities for self-understanding and psychological growth. Your dreams aren't just entertainment for your sleeping brain. They're actually your mind's way of working through the complex emotional and psychological material of your life, using the most creative and symbolic language it knows. Picture this scene for a moment. You're sitting in your favorite coffee shop, steam rising from your cup, and a friend leans across the table with that look in their eyes that says they're about to share something that will completely change how you see the world. That's exactly what Freud did when he opened the door to the unconscious mind, and today we're stepping through that door together. Now think about this for a second. How much of your own mind do you actually have access to? If you're like most people, you probably assume you're pretty much in the driver's seat of your own thoughts and decisions. But Freud had a revolutionary idea that was as shocking in his time as it remains fascinating in ours. He suggested that consciousness, that bright spotlight of awareness we call our waking mind, is actually just the tip of an enormous iceberg floating in the vast ocean of our psyche. Imagine an iceberg for a moment. What you see above the waterline represents your conscious mind, all those thoughts and feelings you're aware of right now. But beneath the surface lies something far more massive and mysterious. That hidden bulk is what Freud called the unconscious, and according to him, it's running the show far more than we'd like to admit. The unconscious isn't just some abstract psychological concept that belongs in dusty textbooks. It's alive and active in your life right now, this very moment. Think about the last time you had a word on the tip of your tongue but couldn't quite retrieve it, or when you walked into a room and completely forgot why you went there. These aren't just random glitches in your mental software. They're glimpses of a vast underground network of thoughts, memories, desires, and fears that operate below the radar of your conscious awareness. Freud discovered that the unconscious has its own language, its own logic, and its own agenda. It speaks to us through dreams, yes, but also through what he called parapraxes, those seemingly innocent slips of the tongue that reveal more than we intended. You know the feeling when you accidentally call your current partner by your ex's name. That's not just clumsiness. That's your unconscious mind making an unscheduled appearance at the worst possible moment. Consider how this plays out in our modern world. We live in an age where we're constantly curating our online presence, crafting the perfect Instagram post or LinkedIn update. We present ourselves as rational, purposeful beings who make deliberate choices. But Freud would chuckle at our digital personas because he understood that beneath our carefully constructed facades, there's a whole other personality operating according to rules we don't consciously understand. The unconscious mind, according to Freud, is like a vast storage facility that never throws anything away. Every experience you've ever had, every emotion you've felt, every desire you've suppressed, it's all there, filed away in the basement of your psyche. But unlike a passive warehouse, this storage facility is more like a bustling underground city with its own weather patterns and political intrigue. Here's where it gets really interesting. Freud argued that the unconscious doesn't just store information, it actively processes and transforms it. It's constantly working, even when you're asleep, connecting dots you didn't know existed, solving problems you didn't know you had, and pursuing goals you didn't know you'd set. It's like having a brilliant but eccentric assistant who works the night shift and never tells you what they're up to. Think about those moments when you've struggled with a problem all day, then wake up the next morning with the solution crystal clear in your mind. Or when you meet someone new and instantly feel either drawn to them or inexplicably uncomfortable, long before you have any rational reason for either reaction. That's your unconscious mind at work, processing information through channels that bypass your logical, conscious thought processes. The manifestations of the unconscious are everywhere once you know how to look for them. They appear in our dreams, obviously, but also in our jokes, our art, our choices in romantic partners, even in the way we arrange our living spaces. Freud believed that nothing in human behavior is truly random. Every action, every choice, every seemingly spontaneous moment is connected to deeper currents flowing through the underground rivers of our minds. Now you might be wondering, if the unconscious is so powerful and influential, why don't we have direct access to it? Freud had a compelling answer. He suggested that much of what's stored in the unconscious is there because our conscious mind found it too threatening, too painful, or too socially unacceptable to deal with directly. So these thoughts and feelings get pushed underground, not destroyed but transformed and disguised. This is where Freud's concept becomes both profound and practical. Understanding the unconscious isn't about becoming a mind reader or unlocking some mystical power. It's about recognizing that you're far more complex and interesting than you probably give yourself credit for. Those patterns in your life that you can't quite explain, those recurring themes in your relationships, those creative inspirations that seem to come from nowhere, they're all connected to this rich, hidden dimension of your psyche. In our contemporary world, where we're bombarded with information and expected to make rational decisions about everything from career moves to coffee choices, Freud's insights about the unconscious offer a kind of relief. They remind us that it's okay not to have everything figured out on a conscious level. In fact, some of our best decisions might come from trusting processes we don't fully understand. The unconscious mind, as Freud revealed it to us, isn't something to fear or fight against. It's something to recognize, respect, and perhaps even befriend. Because whether we acknowledge it or not, it's been our constant companion all along, working tirelessly behind the scenes to make sense of our experiences and guide us through the magnificent complexity of human existence. As we prepare to delve deeper into how these unconscious forces shape our dream life, remember that you're not just learning about psychology here. You're discovering a new way of listening to yourself, a new appreciation for the extraordinary richness of your own mind. Picture this. You're sitting across from me with a steaming cup of coffee, and I'm about to share one of the most revolutionary ideas in the history of human psychology. We've been exploring Freud's groundbreaking work on dreams, and now we're diving into perhaps the most fascinating question of all. Why do we actually dream in the first place? You know, before Freud came along, most people thought dreams were either meaningless brain static or mysterious messages from the gods. But Freud had a completely different idea, one that would change how we understand the human mind forever. He believed that dreams serve a very specific, very important function, and it's not what you might expect. Think about it for a moment. Every single night without fail, your brain creates these elaborate, often bizarre experiences while you sleep. You might find yourself flying through the air, having conversations with people who have been dead for years, or showing up to work completely naked. Now, if dreams were just random neural firing, why would they be so consistent, so universal, and often so emotionally charged? Freud's answer was brilliant in its simplicity. Dreams are the guardians of sleep. Let me explain what he meant by this seemingly poetic phrase. According to Freud, our minds are constantly bombarded with wishes, desires, anxieties, and unresolved conflicts. During our waking hours, we manage these through conscious thought and social conditioning. But what happens when we're asleep and our conscious mind, that vigilant gatekeeper, goes offline? Here's where it gets really interesting. Freud argued that if these repressed wishes and anxieties were allowed to surface in their raw, unfiltered form while we sleep, they would be so disturbing that they'd wake us up immediately. Imagine if every suppressed fear, every forbidden desire, every uncomfortable truth about yourself came flooding into your consciousness at full intensity while you were trying to rest. You'd never get a good night's sleep. So dreams, according to Freud, act like a clever psychological buffer system. They take these potentially sleep-disrupting mental contents and transform them into symbolic, often disguised narratives that allow us to process psychological material without being jolted awake. It's like having a skilled diplomat who takes inflammatory messages and translates them into more palatable language. Consider this real example from Freud's work. He tells the story of a patient who dreamed of a burning house. On the surface, it seems like a simple anxiety dream, but when Freud explored it deeper with the patient, they discovered that the burning house represented the dreamer's fear that his passionate feelings for a married woman would destroy his reputation and social standing. The dream allowed him to experience and process this anxiety in a symbolic form, rather than confronting the raw terror of potentially losing everything he'd worked for. Now, think about your own dreams for a moment. Have you ever noticed how they often feature people and situations from your daily life, but twisted in strange ways? That's what Freud called the dream work in action. Your mind is taking the psychological residue of your day, the unfinished emotional business, the things that bothered or excited you, and weaving them into a narrative that lets you process these feelings safely. But here's where Freud's theory gets even more intriguing. He didn't just see dreams as random processing of daily stress. He believed that dreams primarily serve to fulfill wishes, particularly repressed wishes that we can't acknowledge in our waking lives. This is what he called the wish fulfillment function of dreams. Let me give you a modern example that might resonate. Imagine you're stuck in a job you hate, working for a boss who treats you poorly. During the day, social conventions and practical necessities force you to be polite, to smile, to go along with things. But at night, you might dream of telling your boss exactly what you think of them, or perhaps of achieving great success that makes them irrelevant. The dream allows you to experience the satisfaction of these forbidden wishes without the real-world consequences. Freud observed that children's dreams tend to be much more straightforward than adults' dreams, and this supports his theory beautifully. A child who was denied a piece of cake during the day might simply dream of eating cake all night long. Their wishes are less complicated, less socially problematic, so they need less symbolic disguise. But as we grow older and our desires become more complex and often socially unacceptable, our dreams become more elaborate and symbolic. What's fascinating is how relevant this remains today, over a century later. In our modern world, we're constantly managing multiple identities and suppressing various aspects of ourselves. We have our professional persona, our family role, our social media image. Dreams might be one of the few spaces where all these fragmented parts of ourselves can come together and express what we really feel. Think about how this applies to our digital age. We're bombarded with more stimuli than ever before, more social pressures, more information to process. Our dreams might be working overtime to help us sort through all this psychological material. That weird dream where you're scrolling through an endless social media feed that keeps changing into different scenarios. Maybe that's your mind trying to process the overwhelming nature of our connected world. Freud also recognized that dreams don't just fulfill wishes, they also help us work through traumas and anxieties. He noted that people often have recurring dreams about traumatic events, not because they want to relive the trauma, but because their minds are trying to master it, to gain some sense of control over what felt uncontrollable. This insight feels particularly relevant as we understand more about PTSD and trauma processing. Modern neuroscience has actually supported some of Freud's observations about dreams helping us consolidate memories and process emotional experiences, though the mechanisms are more complex than he imagined. As we wrap up this exploration of dream function, consider how revolutionary Freud's idea really was. He was suggesting that these nightly experiences weren't meaningless or mystical, but were actually sophisticated psychological tools that our minds use to maintain mental health and ensure restful sleep. Dreams, in his view, are evidence of the mind's remarkable ability to protect and heal itself. So tonight, when you drift off to sleep and begin to dream, remember that you're witnessing one of the most elegant solutions evolution has provided for the complexity of human consciousness. Your dreams are working hard to keep you sleeping soundly while processing the rich, complicated tapestry of your inner life. You know how sometimes you wake up from a dream so vivid, so bizarre, that you can't shake it off even after your morning coffee? Well, imagine being Sigmund Freud, sitting in his Vienna study over a century ago, meticulously recording not just his own dreams but diving deep into their hidden meanings like an archaeological dig into the human psyche. This is where Freud's work gets really fascinating, because he doesn't just theorize about dreams. He rolls up his sleeves and shows us exactly how dream interpretation works by examining real dreams, including his own most intimate ones. Picture this scene. Freud, probably with his own cup of coffee growing cold, writing down a dream he had about his friend Otto giving his patient Irma an injection. Now you might think, so what? It's just a random dream about work. But Freud treats this dream like a detective treats a crime scene, examining every detail, every emotion, every seemingly insignificant element. He discovers that this dream, which he calls the Irma injection dream, is actually his mind's way of processing guilt about a patient's treatment and his anxiety about his medical reputation. Think about that for a moment. What seems like a simple workplace dream is actually a complex emotional puzzle his unconscious mind is trying to solve. What makes Freud's approach so revolutionary is how he demonstrates that our dreams aren't just random neural firings, like some modern scientists suggest, but carefully constructed stories our minds tell us about our deepest fears, wishes, and conflicts. He shows us through case after case that dreams have what he calls manifest content, the story we remember, and latent content, the real message hidden underneath. It's like having a conversation where someone is speaking in code, and Freud is teaching us how to crack that code. Consider one of his most compelling examples. A woman who dreams about her young nephew's death. On the surface, this seems like a horrible nightmare, possibly meaningless or even disturbing. But Freud's analysis reveals something profound. The woman had fallen in love with a man she only saw at family funerals. Her unconscious mind, he argues, was expressing her forbidden wish to see this man again, even if it meant another family tragedy. Now, before you recoil at this interpretation, think about how often our minds make these kinds of uncomfortable connections. Haven't you ever caught yourself having thoughts that surprised or even shocked you? Freud is simply saying that dreams are where these suppressed thoughts and feelings get their moment on stage. What's particularly striking about Freud's case studies is how he includes his own dreams without flinching from embarrassing revelations. He analyzes a dream where he's climbing stairs and admits it reveals his ambitious desires and sexual anxieties. This takes remarkable courage. Imagine posting your most private thoughts online today, knowing millions might read them. But Freud understood that to make dream analysis credible, he had to be vulnerable first. He had to show that even the doctor analyzing dreams was subject to the same unconscious processes as his patients. One of the most practical insights from Freud's examples is his method of free association. He doesn't just look at the dream and make wild guesses about its meaning. Instead, he asks the dreamer to talk about each element of the dream, following their thoughts wherever they lead, like following breadcrumbs through a forest. When someone dreams about a house, for instance, Freud doesn't immediately say houses represent the self. He asks, what does this particular house remind you of? What feelings does it evoke? What memories surface? This approach is something we can actually use today when we're puzzled by our own dreams. Think about how relevant this is to our modern world of constant stimulation and suppressed emotions. We live in an era where we're encouraged to stay positive, to push through difficult feelings, to keep busy and productive. But Freud's dream analyses suggest that all those pushed-down thoughts and feelings don't just disappear. They show up in our dreams, often in disguised form. That stress dream about showing up to an exam you forgot to study for. It might not be about academics at all, but about feeling unprepared for some challenge in your current life. Freud also demonstrates through his cases how dreams often fulfill wishes, but not in the obvious way we might expect. A hungry person doesn't just dream about food, though sometimes they do. More often, the wish fulfillment is psychological and symbolic. A person feeling powerless in their waking life might dream of flying or being a superhero. Someone struggling with a relationship might dream of being pursued by an admirer or, conversely, of being abandoned. The key insight here is that dreams are our mind's way of giving us experiences we crave, but can't have in reality. What makes Freud's examples so enduring is how they reveal the incredible creativity of the human mind. Dreams take our concerns, fears, and desires, and weave them into stories that are often more imaginative than any novel or film. They condense multiple meanings into single images, create impossible scenarios that somehow make emotional sense, and allow us to experience things that would be impossible or inappropriate in waking life. It's like having a master storyteller working in your head every night, one who knows all your secrets and isn't afraid to use them. The practical wisdom that emerges from Freud's dream analyses is that paying attention to our dreams can offer us insights into ourselves that we might not access any other way. While we don't have to accept every detail of Freud's interpretations, his fundamental approach, treating dreams as meaningful communications from our unconscious minds, opens up a rich territory for self-understanding that many of us ignore. As we move forward in our exploration of Freud's groundbreaking work, we'll see how these individual dream analyses build into a larger theory about how the human mind works, not just during sleep, but in every aspect of our daily lives. The dreams are just the beginning of a much deeper journey into the hidden chambers of human consciousness. Picture this. You've just spent an entire evening with a brilliant friend who's completely revolutionized how you think about something as ordinary as sleep. That's exactly what we've experienced together as we've journeyed through Freud's masterpiece, The Interpretation of Dreams. As we reach the conclusion of this groundbreaking work, it's time to step back and appreciate the magnificent tapestry Freud has woven for us, thread by revolutionary thread. Think about how you felt about your dreams before we started this journey together. Maybe you dismissed them as random neural firings, or perhaps you thought they were just your brain's way of filing away the day's experiences. Now, after walking through Freud's meticulous analysis, you're looking at dreams through an entirely different lens. You're seeing them as Freud did, as the royal road to the unconscious mind, each one a carefully crafted message from the deepest parts of ourselves. Freud's central revelation remains as startling today as it was over a century ago. Every dream, he argues, represents the fulfillment of a wish. Now, before you protest and think about that nightmare you had last week, remember that Freud isn't talking about surface-level desires. He's diving into the murky waters of repressed wishes, forbidden thoughts, and unconscious longings that our waking minds would never dare acknowledge. It's like discovering that your quiet, reserved neighbor has been writing passionate love letters in secret for decades. Consider how this changes everything about our nighttime experiences. That bizarre dream where you were flying through your childhood home while your third-grade teacher served you birthday cake isn't just random nonsense. According to Freud, it's your psyche working overtime, weaving together memories, desires, and fears into a narrative that satisfies some deep, hidden wish. Perhaps it's the wish to return to a time of innocence, or the desire to feel powerful and free, or even the longing to be celebrated and loved unconditionally. The genius of Freud's approach lies in his recognition that dreams speak in symbols, not literal language. Think of dreams as your unconscious mind's poetry, where every image carries multiple meanings and every scenario represents layers of psychological truth. When you dream about water, you might be processing emotions. When you dream about houses, you could be exploring different aspects of your personality. This symbolic language is universal, yet deeply personal, like a secret code that each of us must learn to decipher for ourselves. But here's where Freud's work becomes particularly fascinating for our modern world. In an age where we're constantly connected, constantly stimulated, constantly performing versions of ourselves on social media, the unconscious mind becomes even more important. We're so busy curating our public personas that we rarely give our deeper selves a voice. Dreams become the one place where our authentic desires can emerge, unfiltered by social expectations or conscious censorship. Now think about this. Freud introduced us to the concept of dream work, the psychological processes that transform our raw, unconscious wishes into the strange, symbolic narratives we experience while sleeping. This isn't just academic theory. It's a practical understanding of how our minds protect us from truths we're not ready to face. The dream work includes condensation, where multiple thoughts and feelings get compressed into single images, and displacement, where emotional significance gets shifted from one element to another. It's like your mind is a master filmmaker, using metaphor and symbolism to tell stories that your conscious self can tolerate. The implications of this understanding extend far beyond the bedroom. In our daily lives, we can start recognizing these same psychological mechanisms at work. When you find yourself inexplicably irritated with a coworker, might that anger be displaced from somewhere else? When you feel drawn to certain movies, books, or activities, could they be fulfilling unconscious wishes through symbolic satisfaction? Freud's insights about dreams become a lens for understanding the hidden motivations behind much of human behavior. Perhaps most remarkably, Freud's work on dreams laid the foundation for our entire modern understanding of the unconscious mind. Before the interpretation of dreams, psychology largely focused on conscious thoughts and observable behaviors. Freud dared to suggest that the most important aspects of human psychology happen below the surface of awareness, in realms we can only access indirectly through dreams, slips of the tongue, and symbolic expressions. This revolutionary perspective has shaped not just psychology and psychiatry, but literature, art, and popular culture. Every time we talk about Freudian slips, every time we analyze the deeper meaning behind someone's actions, every time we acknowledge that people aren't always aware of their own motivations, we're building on the foundation that Freud established through his dream analysis. In our contemporary world, where mental health awareness is finally getting the attention it deserves, Freud's emphasis on the importance of unconscious processes feels particularly relevant. We're beginning to understand that healing often requires us to explore not just our conscious thoughts and feelings, but the deeper patterns and hidden wounds that influence our behavior without our awareness. The practical wisdom of Freud's approach lies not in memorizing his specific interpretations of dream symbols, but in adopting his curious, analytical mindset. When you wake up from a vivid dream, instead of immediately dismissing it, try sitting with it for a moment. What emotions did it evoke? What connections can you draw to your current life circumstances? What wishes or fears might it be expressing in symbolic form? As we close our journey through this seminal work, remember that Freud wasn't just analyzing dreams. He was pioneering a new way of understanding human consciousness itself. He showed us that we're far more complex and mysterious than we often realize, that our minds are constantly working on multiple levels, and that paying attention to our inner lives can lead to profound insights about who we are and what we truly desire. The next time you drift off to sleep tonight, you'll carry with you this new understanding. Your dreams aren't just random neural static. They're messages from the deepest parts of yourself, waiting to be decoded and understood. In the interpretation of dreams, Sigmund Freud guides us through the intricate labyrinth of the unconscious mind, offering a profound exploration of dreams as a gateway to understanding our deepest desires and fears. Freud's pioneering work lays the foundation for psychoanalysis, presenting dreams as meaningful narratives that reflect our inner psyche. Throughout the book, he introduces the concept of dream interpretation, postulating that dreams are not random, but rather purposeful, containing symbolic messages that can be decoded through analysis. The narrative ties together various facets of Freudian theory, such as the role of repressed desires and the mechanisms of the psyche, namely the id, ego, and superego. Here are some key takeaways to consider. 1. Dreams as windows into the unconscious. Dreams provide a unique insight into our unconscious mind. Practically, keep a dream journal by your bedside and jot down your dreams as soon as you wake up. Start incredibly small. Even a single word or emotion can serve as a clue to your subconscious. 2. Symbols as the language of dreams. Dreams communicate through symbols. To apply this, familiarize yourself with common dream symbols and their meanings. Be patient with yourself as you learn to interpret these symbols, recognizing that personal context is crucial. 3. Repressed desires manifest in dreams. Our unfulfilled desires often surface in dreams. Reflect on recurring themes or characters in your dreams. Consider what unmet needs or unresolved emotions they might represent, and explore small, actionable steps to address these in waking life. 4. The role of the psyche. Dreams reflect the interplay between the id, ego, and superego. Observe how different aspects of your psyche manifest in your dreams. Embrace a curious mindset as you explore the balance between your instinctual desires, rational thoughts, and moral values. 5. Dream analysis as a tool for personal growth. Dream interpretation can lead to greater self-awareness and personal development. Approach your dreams with openness and curiosity. Reflect on how the insights you gain can be integrated into your personal journey and used to foster growth and change. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below with at least one idea from this book that stuck with you, one concept you're going to carry forward. It could be something that challenged your thinking, something you want to try, or even something you disagreed with. Your insight might be exactly what another listener needs to hear today. And if this summary gave you something valuable, a new perspective, a spark of motivation, or even just a peaceful hour with your coffee, share it with someone who might need it too. Subscribe to One Book, One Coffee, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new summary. Every week, we sit down together with one great book, one warm cup of coffee, and the simple belief that wisdom, shared well, can change lives. Until next time, keep reading, keep growing, and remember, every small step counts. See you at the next book.